The summer heat pressed against the chain-link fence surrounding Fort Braxton as 12-year-old Sarah Chen stepped out of her mother's sedan. The military base sprawled before them like a small city, all concrete buildings and perfectly manicured lawns under the North Carolina sun. Sarah adjusted her backpack straps and squinted at the signs directing families toward the annual Community Day festivities. Her mother Lisa fumbled with the visitor passes, clearly nervous about navigating the unfamiliar military environment. Sarah had been looking forward to this day for weeks, ever since she learned they would have access to parts of the base normally off-limits to civilians. The shooting range was somewhere beyond those buildings, and she could already hear the distant pop of gunfire echoing across the compound. Colonel Matthews emerged from the administrative building, his uniform crisp despite the heat. He surveyed the arriving families with the practiced eye of someone accustomed to command. His gaze swept past Sarah without pause, focusing instead on the fathers and older sons who looked like they belonged in this environment. Sarah's fingers traced the edge of something hidden in her backpack as she watched uniformed personnel directing families toward various demonstration areas. The shooting range called to her with an almost magnetic pull, though she kept this interest carefully concealed behind her quiet demeanor. The demonstration areas buzzed with activity as families rotated through various military exhibits. Sarah watched a group of teenagers attempt to disassemble a training rifle under the guidance of a patient sergeant. Their clumsy fumbling made her wince internally, though she kept her expression neutral. Colonel Matthews approached their group with the confidence of someone who enjoyed being the center of attention. He began explaining the intricacies of military life to the assembled civilians, his voice carrying the authority of decades in uniform. When Sarah's mother asked about the shooting range, Matthews chuckled condescendingly. "The range is for serious marksmen, not a playground for children," he declared, his eyes briefly acknowledging Sarah's presence with obvious dismissal. The other adults nodded along, accepting his expertise without question. Sarah remained silent as her mother apologized for the presumptuous question. The colonel's attitude toward her was nothing new. Adults often underestimated quiet 12-year-old girls, especially in environments dominated by military tradition and masculine expectations. She had learned to use this invisibility to her advantage. The sound of precise gunfire continued to drift across the base, each shot calling to something deep within her training. Where in the world are you watching from and what time is it there? She wondered about others who might understand this pull toward precision and excellence that burned quietly inside her small frame. The family tour continued through the motor pool where massive vehicles gleamed in the afternoon sun. Sarah dutifully followed along, nodding at appropriate moments while her thoughts remained fixed on the distant rifle range. Every few minutes, the sharp crack of gunfire reminded her of Saturday mornings spent in secluded woods, learning lessons her mother never knew about. Colonel Matthews had warmed to his role as tour guide, regaling the group with war stories and technical specifications that impressed the civilian fathers. He particularly enjoyed demonstrating his knowledge to the mothers, speaking slowly as if explaining complex concepts to children. Sarah noticed how he positioned himself to exclude her from conversations, addressing questions over her head to the adults. When they passed a display of marksmanship trophies, Sarah's eyes lingered on the names and scores etched into brass plates. Colonel Matthews caught her staring and smirked. "Those scores represent years of training and discipline, little girl," he said with barely concealed amusement. The other visitors chuckled along, assuming she was simply impressed by the shiny awards. Sarah's fingers tightened around the strap of her backpack where her father's dog tags lay hidden beneath notebooks and snacks. The weight of them reminded her of promises made over his grave, of skills passed down through whispered instructions and weekend sessions that officially never happened. The tour group approached the communications center where radio operators demonstrated equipment that coordinated global military operations. Sarah absorbed every detail while maintaining her facade of polite disinterest. Colonel Matthews explained frequencies and protocols with the air of someone who had never been questioned about his expertise. Range Master Sergeant Torres appeared at the edge of the group, his weathered face bearing the quiet competence that comes from years of training soldiers. He exchanged brief words with Matthews about the afternoon shooting schedule. Sarah caught fragments of their conversation about ammunition counts and target distances that most civilians would find meaningless. When Torres mentioned needing to clear the range for family demonstrations, Matthews laughed loudly. "We should let the children try their hand at marksmanship," he said with obvious sarcasm. "Maybe this little one could show us how it's done." His gesture toward Sarah prompted more chuckles from the adults who assumed they were witnessing harmless military humor. Sarah's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. She had spent countless hours perfecting her breathing, her stance, her trigger control under the tutelage of someone whose skills were legendary among people who understood such things. The casual mockery stung not because it hurt her feelings, but because it dishonored everything her father had taught her about precision and respect. The group finally reached the shooting range where the afternoon sun cast long shadows across the firing line. Sarah's pulse quickened as she observed the setup with eyes trained to assess wind conditions, lighting angles, and target placement. The familiar scent of gun oil and cordite filled her nostrils like a homecoming she could never openly acknowledge. Colonel Matthews positioned himself at the center of attention, gesturing broadly toward the targets downrange. "This facility trains some of the finest marksmen in the military," he announced proudly. "Our instructors maintain standards that separate professionals from weekend hobbyists." His emphasis on the word professionals carried obvious implications about civilian capabilities. Staff Sergeant Rodriguez emerged from the equipment shed carrying rifles for the adult demonstration. Matthews intercepted him with theatrical concern. "Better keep those weapons away from the children, Rodriguez. We wouldn't want any accidents from inexperienced hands." Sarah watched Rodriguez nod respectfully while privately noting how the sergeant's grip and handling revealed someone who understood firearms as tools rather than symbols. The mockery was reaching new heights as other families gathered to watch the demonstration. "Have you ever witnessed someone surprise everyone with hidden talents?" Sarah wondered silently, knowing that moments like these often revealed truths that comfortable assumptions preferred to keep buried. The demonstration began with the base's top marksmen taking positions at the firing line. Colonel Matthews provided running commentary designed to impress the civilian audience, his voice carrying across the range with practiced authority. Sarah watched each shooter's form with critical eyes, noting inconsistencies in breathing patterns and stance alignment that her father would have corrected immediately. Sergeant First Class Williams stepped up to demonstrate long-range precision shooting. Matthews announced his credentials loudly, emphasizing combat deployments and competition victories. Williams fired 3 shots at a target 300 yards downrange, achieving a respectable grouping that drew applause from the watching families. Matthews turned to the crowd with obvious satisfaction. "This is what 20 years of training produces," he declared. "Military precision isn't something you learn from video games or movies." His gaze found Sarah deliberately, the implication clear that children especially had no place in discussions of serious marksmanship. Sarah's mother shifted uncomfortably beside her, sensing the tension but uncertain how to respond. Other families murmured appreciatively about the demonstration while their children pointed excitedly at the distant targets. What would you do if you were in this situation, Sarah thought, knowing that her next decision would either maintain her protective anonymity or honor everything her father had died defending. The demonstration concluded with enthusiastic applause as the marksmen cleared their weapons and stepped back from the firing line. Colonel Matthews basked in the reflected glory of his subordinate's performance, clearly enjoying his role as the expert explaining military excellence to impressed civilians. His chest swelled with pride as parents asked questions about training requirements and qualification standards. Sarah stepped forward from the crowd, her small frame barely noticeable among the adults until she spoke with quiet determination. "Colonel Matthews, I would like to request range time." Her voice carried clearly across the sudden silence that fell over the gathering. Every head turned toward the 12-year-old girl who had just made what seemed like an absurd proposition. Matthew's face cycled through surprise, amusement, and finally settled on condescending patience. "Sweetheart, this isn't a carnival game," he said with exaggerated gentleness. "These weapons require strength and training that takes years to develop. Perhaps you should stick to the other activities designed for children your age." The crowd chuckled nervously, uncertain whether they were witnessing childhood boldness or something more significant. Sarah's mother reached for her arm, whispering urgent protests, but Sarah remained focused on the colonel's dismissive smile. Her father's voice echoed in her memory, reminding her that respect was earned through demonstration, not argument. 6 months later, Marcus stood in his new office overlooking the city, watching Emma and Lily play in the employee childcare center he had designed. The Wells Family Connection initiative had helped over 200 families find balance between professional success and meaningful relationships, using the same gentle wisdom that had brought 2 broken families together on one stormy night. Catherine knocked softly before entering, carrying 2 cups of coffee and wearing the relaxed smile that had replaced her perpetual look of stressed urgency. "The quarterly board meeting went perfectly," she said, settling into the chair across from his desk. "The family wellness program is being implemented in 12 more cities next year." Marcus accepted the coffee gratefully, still amazed at how naturally their professional partnership had developed. "More importantly, how's Lily adjusting to the new custody arrangement with her father?" "She's thriving," Catherine replied, her voice warm with genuine happiness. "Both girls are. Emma has been such a wonderful influence, teaching Lily that families can be small and still be complete, that love matters more than luxury." Through the window, they watched their daughters building something elaborate with blocks, their laughter floating up from the childcare center like music. Marcus thought about the night he had found a scared little girl in a parking garage, never imagining that act of simple kindness would restore purpose to his own broken life. If this story touched your heart, let us know where you're listening from and what family means to you, because sometimes the most extraordinary transformations begin with the smallest acts of compassion between strangers who become family. The tension crackled across the range as more personnel gathered to witness the unprecedented scene. Colonel Matthews found himself caught between maintaining his authority and managing a situation that was spiraling beyond his comfortable control. His initial amusement had hardened into irritation as the girl refused to back down from her request. Torres stepped closer to Sarah, his experienced eyes noting details that others missed. The way she held her hands, the unconscious assessment of wind direction, the manner in which she positioned herself relative to the firing line all spoke of genuine training. "Tell me about your instructor," he said quietly, his voice cutting through Matthew's continued protests. Sarah's jaw tightened slightly before she responded. "Gunnery Sergeant David Chen, United States Marine Corps. He taught me that precision is a discipline, not a talent." Her words carried weight that silenced the murmuring crowd, and several veterans in the gathering straightened at the mention of military rank and bearing. Matthew's face flushed red as he realized the implications of her statement. The surname Chen, combined with her obvious mixed heritage and the military precision of her bearing, suggested connections he had not anticipated. Staff Sergeant Rodriguez exchanged meaningful glances with other NCOs who recognized the gravity shifting in ways their colonel had not yet comprehended. Torres moved toward the equipment shed with deliberate purpose, returning with a rifle that he handled with the reverence reserved for precision instruments. The gathered crowd watched in stunned silence as he began the formal safety briefing that preceded any live-fire exercise. Colonel Matthews stood frozen, realizing that his authority had been quietly superseded by someone who understood the true situation. Sarah accepted the weapon with practiced ease, her small hands finding proper grip positions that spoke of countless hours of training. She performed the safety check with mechanical precision, her movements flowing through procedures that most adults would struggle to remember under pressure. The rifle looked oversized in her hands, but her handling revealed deep familiarity with its weight and balance. Range personnel scrambled to set fresh targets at increasing distances, sensing that this demonstration would require their full capabilities. Torres called out the 200-yard target for the initial shot, a distance that would challenge experienced marksmen. Sarah settled into a prone position with fluid grace, her breathing already shifting into the controlled rhythm that preceded precision shooting. The crowd pressed closer despite safety protocols, everyone understanding they were witnessing something extraordinary. "Share this with someone who needs to hear this story," Sarah thought as she found her natural point of aim, knowing that her father's legacy was about to speak through her actions. Sarah's breathing settled into the deep, controlled rhythm her father had drilled into her during countless training sessions. The world narrowed to the essential elements: wind speed, target distance, sight alignment, and the steady beat of her heart between breaths. The crowd's murmurs faded into background noise as she entered the focus state that separated marksmen from shooters. The rifle cracked with authority, sending its projectile across 200 yards of North Carolina air. Through the spotting scope, Torres watched the bullet strike dead center of the target's bullseye, creating a hole so perfectly placed it might have been drawn there. His weathered face remained expressionless, but his hands moved immediately to adjust the scope for confirmation. Colonel Matthews stared through binoculars, his face cycling through disbelief, confusion, and dawning comprehension. The shot was not lucky or accidental. It displayed the kind of precision that required years of dedicated training under expert instruction. The other military personnel exchanged knowing looks as they recognized skill that could not be faked or fluked. Sarah remained in position, her breathing still controlled, waiting for Torres to call the next target. The silence stretched across the range as everyone processed what they had witnessed. This reminds us that everyone has hidden depths, and sometimes the most profound capabilities reside in the most unexpected places. Torres called for targets at 300 yards, then 400, each distance presenting challenges that would test veteran marksmen. Sarah adjusted her position with mechanical precision, accounting for wind drift and bullet drop with calculations that flowed from muscle memory rather than conscious thought. Each shot found its mark with devastating accuracy that silenced every doubt and assumption. Colonel Matthews approached slowly, his earlier arrogance replaced by something approaching reverence. He knelt beside Sarah as she cleared the weapon with professional competence that belonged in training manuals. "Gunnery Sergeant Chen," he said quietly, recognition finally dawning. "Your father trained half the snipers in this division before his deployment." Sarah nodded once, her composure never wavering even as tears threatened at the corners of her eyes. He said precision was about honoring the weapon and respecting the target. Every shot carries responsibility. Her words echoed lessons learned in whispered conversations and weekend sessions that had prepared her for moments exactly like this one. The crowd erupted in applause that carried genuine respect rather than polite obligation. Range personnel surrounded Sarah with questions about her training, while Torres quietly arranged for her name to be added to the base's unofficial Hall of Excellence. Where in the world are you right now, sharing in this moment of truth that proves assumptions crumble when faced with authentic skill and dedication passed down through generations of service?